But then I started reading this book, and it was filled with, well, intrigue and all sorts of things. So we talked with W.C. Sorice, who lives in Orlando, and talked about his book, and we featured it as one of our Publisher's Choice books. So good morning, W.C. Should I call you Bill?
Bill would be fine, yes.
Wow. Well, we really have enjoyed this book. It was quite a pocketful, as they say.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And is this your first book?
Yes, it is.
Well, I think you have now you have started something, and I'm sure you're thinking in terms of, well, okay, what am I going to write next? But let's get back with this book, A Pocket Full of Posies. It's not really about posies that we think of flowers, is it?
Well, it actually has a little bit more to do, obviously, with the main character's name, who is, the last name is Posey. But there are references to flowers, especially as to how one of the characters got his name. And it kind of ends with a whole bunch of flowers, too. So there's flowers in there as well as the character named Posey.
Well, that's true. Thank you. So when you were writing this, what made you pick these subjects? And we'll talk a little bit about it, but it is an historical novel, and it does start in 1905. Now, you're young, so you had to go back there and reach into the dates of history in Florida.
Yeah, true, but I'm a longtime teacher, and one of the things that I used to teach on a consistent basis every year was knowledge of Central Florida to kids who were getting history of the country, but sometimes didn't know often what happened in their own communities. So one of the things I used to teach you about was the 1920 Ocoee race riot, and that's kind of where this book starts with that story itself.
Yeah, that really was amazing, because so many of your students, I'm sure, never could even have imagined what people had to put up with.
It really is amazing. Even back in the 70s when I first started teaching this stuff, and even today, it's often amazing. Students kind of lack of knowledge. One of my running jokes when I talk to kids today is that, during February, Black History Month, or on Martin Luther King's birthday, the only two things they know about the civil rights movement is Martin Luther King gave a great speech and Rosa Parks didn't give up her speech. And they all kind of laugh because they've been told those two stories probably since first grade or second grade. And they've been told those two stories over and over and over and over again. And not that they're not important stories, but they're just such a small part of a much, much larger history.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it's awful difficult even to explain to children, students, even high school students, what the civil rights movement was about without them understanding the 250 years of slavery of the African Americans in our country. So it's a history lesson that kind of spans the whole history of the United States. And I've often been a proponent of making sure that kids understand it, and especially local.
Yeah, you did a great job in this book. It was, the one thing I have to just tell everybody that Alexander Posey lived to be 102 years old, and that was fun to end it that way. But the book really focuses on an FBI conspiracy plot against a decade-spinning American backdrop. In its interweaving of historical episodes, rock and roll superstars, civil rights angst, and current events, it carries all of you through tumultuous times of the 50s and 60s. And this really is the story of Alexander Posey. So you are very passionate about this.
Yeah, I always have been. I was very fortunate to be brought up by a family, particularly a mother, whose stories go back to the 1950s. We moved from Chicago to Pascagoula, Mississippi in 1955, and my mother got a job. She was a registered nurse. She got a job at a hospital. And one of her first couple of days, she was informed by a hospital administrator not to refer to black men as sir. but call them what we call them down here in the South. Was basically his message to her. And my mother kind of said, well, that's not how I was raised, and if you don't like it, you can take this job and shove it. So I was kind of brought up with some people and surrounded by family members who were kind of passionate about equality and equal rights. And I had 3 older sisters who fully informed me about me doing my own laundry and me doing my own dishes when I was a young boy. So I learned even from that standpoint, too, to make sure that equality was across the board.
Wow. I love your mother.
She was great.
Yeah.
My mother was a fabulous person with an absolute tremendous sense of humor. Matter of fact, if you don't mind, I'm going to correct you about the pronunciation of my last name. It's actually pronounced Sorice.
Oh, thank you. I didn't know that. Sorice.
Well,
Okay.
You know, it's funny because it's part of my mother's humor, but it's been mispronounced forever. I mean, people have pronounced it Sorice, Sorice, sour ice. But the Sorice one is the funny one because my father, who was a great provider, but only knew how to yell and scream and be miserable all the time. And it was my mother's sense of humor that helped us survive that. But I had a history teacher that said, why don't you go home and find out where your last name came from? So I got home that day. My mother was very upset with my dad, again, for his attitude. But her sense of humor always shined through. And she said, you go back and tell that teacher that your great-great-great-grandfather was a sore ass, and that's how you got that name. It's really pronounced sore ass. So the teacher got a kick out of it. But that was my mom. She was a wonderful person.
So we're going to say source. We're not going to say sorass, right?
But we're going to say Sorice.
So we're going to say Sorice. Okay, Sorice.
It's actually an Italian name, and it's pronounced Sorice.
Ah.
But my grandfather, when he came from Italy and got a job as a groundskeeper at Columbia University, was told by a professor who spoke Italian that it would be wise for him to Americanize his name. I often joke with people that the way you can teach American history is which group don't we like now? And at that time, it was the Italians and the Irish. So my father's name went from Rocco Roberto Sorici to Bob Sorice overnight.
Oh, that's very funny. You really, I see your picture. You do look like you have a sense of humor. I can see it. So it's Sorice. That's how it is, right?
Sorice.
Sorice. Right?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. W.C. Sorice. Now, how did you get to Orlando?
Well, my dad was in the Navy, and when he retired from Jacksonville, and we Green Coast Springs, he got a job in Martin, Marietta. Now I think it's Martin Lockheed, but back in the day it was Martin, Marietta, pre-Disney in Orlando. And so we moved down here, and I've lived in Orlando since 1959.
Well, let me ask you this. I want to go back to your book because it really carried me through. Every chapter was a part of the family, just another part of the family appeared or something else, and they were moving around. And some of the things that happened to them they were very sad. They almost put tears in my eyes. And this is your first book, so you really figured out how to do this. Did you take writing classes?
No, I didn't. I actually been dabbling in writing ever since I was young. I've sat and attempted to write a novel many, many, many times. Wrote short stories, but I think a lot of it just comes from taking sometimes rather dry stories in history when you have to relay them to kids. And I was just constantly trying to come up with creative ways to bring those stories to life, to make history a little bit more a living thing for kids. I used to say my history lessons connect with the dead guys with the live guys. So we try to make sure that it's something that captures their attention and pulls at their heartstrings sometimes. Amazing how I can shove information down a high school student's throat, and it seems like you should care less. But if you pull at their heartstrings, sometimes they you gather their attention, and then they're willing to listen a little bit more to the facts, the details. But I think a lot of my writing comes from storytelling more than anything else.
Yes, I see where that's something you really like to do. And something I will tell everybody right now that Irma Bombeck was really related to Bill. So why don't you explain that?
Yeah, it was interesting. And I knew I had an aunt named Irma. It's my mother's brother's wife. When we were young, they had 3 kids. We had 5, and there were many times that we would get together. They lived in Ohio, up in Centerville, Ohio. Obviously, we were in Orlando. But the times we'd all get the family together and hang out with my cousins and stuff. And then my grandmother would take me up to Ohio during the summer, and I would spend time up there. And, I knew my aunt was a writer and wrote in the paper. And when you're a young boy and you're more concerned about throwing a football than you are reading a book, I didn't really much pay attention to it. When I was growing up and everything, and then they moved from Centerville, Ohio to Scottsdale, Arizona, and at that time I was a little more politically aware of what was going on in the world. And when I learned they lived down the street from Barry Goldwater, I thought, well, maybe she is somebody famous. So by that time, she was on Good Morning America and had written a number of books, and I remember her as a giggler. It always seemed like she was laughing at something. And my uncle obviously had a great sense of humor, like my mother, and so it was always nice to be around them. I have to tell you that. And not that it wasn't nice being around my family. I had great sisters and great brothers and a great mother. And my dad was a wonderful guy, but he created a lot of tension in the family. So it was nice to spend the summer not having to worry about spilling milk at dinner.
Oh, right. We've all been through that. Oh, have we been through that? Well, I want to tell you that Irma Bombeck was one of my favorite people because I would take some of her quotations, some of her short little stories. They were always hysterical.
Oh, she was great. I think the one, I remember the one, and my wife always brings it up, if you did housework the right way, it would kill you.
Yep. Well,
yeah.
I'm glad that you were talking, though, about your students and that you could say things and probably they, talk about history, the dates, and it just goes over most people's heads, actually. But the way that you wrote your first chapter, when I read about, here, this wonderful little family, they happened to be African-American and they were in the South, and there were those bad people who didn't see them as human beings, just saw them as something else, almost animals, if you want to say. And then how you could see them have to escape, and when the people they left behind were murdered. I mean, it just broke my heart.
Yeah. Well, it's a true history, unfortunately. Cody had the city of Ocoee had a small black population pre-1920, and then it wasn't until probably, I'm going to say maybe as late as the 1970s before the African-American blacks started coming back to Ocoee. And there was an Ocoee Reconciliation Committee that worked through the issues of the Ocoee race riot and attempted compensation for people who lost homes and things. But it had happened so long ago, they had a really hard time, contacting anybody that was there at the time. Zora Neale Hurston did an investigation of it. It was kind of neat that her investigation was much different than the official investigation. And one of the inspirations for my main character, Alexander Posey, I don't remember the fellow's name, but he was an NAACP worker from up north who had the ability to be able to survive in the white world or the colored world, as they said back then. And he actually went into Ocoee pretending to be a white person a day after the riot, and actually was able to talk and interview people casually, just kind of acting like he was walking around asking what was going on. But he was working with the NAACP, and some of his information was chilling as to what some of these people said. So, yeah, it was a rough time in our country, and, I wish my mother would have lived long enough to see this country elect a black president. It was quite a thing, and politically, I'm not going to go into good or bad, other than I think it was an amazing thing this country did after all of the years of the history of electing a black president. I wish my mother would have been alive to see that.
In fact, I always thought that a female would come first.
It's funny. I did too. I really thought Hillary was going to win that nomination. And we still may have that female president. I was, again, joking and trying to keep kids laughing. I said, you look at the pictures of the president. It's an old white man's club.
Yes.
Maybe it's about time we give some other people an opportunity to represent America. So,
yes.
And America's changing.
I have to tell you something, Bill. I would have loved to take your class. You sound like you just do a good job, and I'm sure a lot of your students don't forget you and what you told them.
Well, what was really neat for me was, when you start writing a book and you start marketing your book, one of the things they tell you is you have to have, social media presence. And I'd never been on Facebook in my life up until about 2 months before Christmas. And when I went on Facebook, it was a very short period of time before I had, 500 friends of all these kids that I used to teach back in the 70s, even up into the 2000s, and colleagues, but mostly students. And it was just really kind of neat to connect with them.
Good for you.
My first book signing was at a sports bar, which I think more people showed up to the sports bar signing than the library signing. So I think my friends drink more than read. But
oh, but we had
a bunch of people show up that night. They were from all different schools that I taught at. Kind of a reunion for all. It was kind of neat.
Wow, that's great. I am really glad to hear this. Now, I want to talk a little bit about Elvis Presley, the rock and roll. Did you like that time of life?
Again, one of the jokes, I'm always joking with kids when I sub today. I kind of like to stay active, so I still go into Orange County classrooms. When I'm talking to high school kids, they often ask you what you do. And so I tell them I write a book, and I usually tell them, well, the book's it's an adult book. It's not really for you. I say, it's got sex, drugs, and rock and roll in it. 3 things that you don't know about. And they all start laughing. And then I said, well, 2 things. You know about sex and drugs. You know nothing about rock and roll. So I'm kind of on a mission, in a way, a personal mission, of educating as many young people as I can as to the roots of rock and roll, of where it started. Because I can be amazed. I'm amazed. I'm a student of it. I wasn't obviously I was very young when Elvis was around. But I'm amazed by the fact that music, which preachers preached against from the pulpit, was used to sell Cadillacs in the 80s. So, it just it amazes me that music is still around, and I want as many people to know about Elvis Presley and Little Richard and Chuck Berry and all of them as much as I can. So, I'm a big fan of music.
Well, I lived in Miami at the time that Elvis Presley was in the 1960s, I think, late 50s, 60s, that I saw Elvis Presley sing at one of the big theaters down here.
Wow.
And it was screaming people. I know I was screaming, and I didn't even remember screaming till I came out, and I was totally hoarse. Right. But he was, what a performer, because we never saw a man shake his butt right. the way he did. And yes, he really had quite a life. And so I feel like I was a part of that. That's why I liked it. And then the other stuff, though, that concerned me, I mean, you did it, but I hated to read about the FBI and the way that the FBI was targeting certain kinds of individuals, mostly from, Hollywood. That was a terrible time in history, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's interesting, too, because documents it's called COINTELPRO, which was Hoover's program to investigate and discredit anything that was communist in his eyes. And when the Church Commission investigated it, a lot of the documents were missing, redacted, not available. And so a lot of the information, actually, what Hoover was doing, we all kind of know he was doing something. He was a very powerful person in our country. But everything he actually kind of found out, I'm not sure we all know today, or things he was investigating, good or bad, But that's why I think people our age, I know people that say, "Oh, so what the NSA is spying on America?" It's not a big deal. On us, it is a big deal because we want to make sure there's one thing looking for terrorists, and there's another thing looking for information to use politically, which seems to be a little bit of a history of our country. So, it was interesting research for me to do. I knew a lot about it, but the research I did on it was even more eye-opening.
So this took you, and it's not the actual writing, because, were you teaching? As a teacher, you had a lot of the information, but you actually had to do research. And did you do that? Of course, now with the internet, you could do a lot, but did you have to go to libraries, or what'd you do?
Well, there were two things I wanted to do. One was as much research as I could, not just on the internet, but also reading books and other things that people have written about it. But I actually went on a road trip. I actually spent time in Birmingham, and I went up to Memphis and spent time at the Lorraine Motel. I wanted to, when I recreated, especially the assassination of Martin Luther King, I wanted to be as accurate as possible in regards to actually having seen the place. So when I described it, and I tried to make it, be realistic, that there could have been somebody else there, that there could have been somebody with James Earl Ray. I wanted to be really, really kind of have a vision in my mind as I was writing that. So I did some actual road research, road trip research. I also had a wonderful time on Beale Street, but that's another story. But I wanted to do both. And I know, obviously the Orlando area, the Central Florida area. I threw in there the teepee hotel that we had years ago in Orlando. That were these big, giant cement teepees. And it was an Indian Village hotel. I put that in the book. And that's kind of like one of the little things in Central Florida. Only old-timers know about that from Central Florida. Every once in a while, it shows up in a newspaper in the nostalgia section. So.
Well, my guess.
I used my own experience.
Yeah, you did. You used your experience. You worked hard at this. You had a passion because you believed in what was right. And the name of the book is A Pocketful of Posies. The author is W.C. Sorice. How'd I do on that one, right?
You did great. Thank you so much.
And the way you're going to buy this, and it's a small book, so it's easy to put into your purse or to take to the beach or sit and read it, and you will get through that book. You won't put it down. You just go through it chapter after chapter, and it will refresh your memory depending on your age. Of course, we have a big boomer senior readership and listenership, and so I think you'll enjoy it. You're going to be able. It's only $12.95. You can't go to the movies for that anymore, and you can purchase it over at Amazon.com, or you can go to FireSpicePress.com. FireSpicePress.com. And of course, now that you've heard the author, that's why we do this. It's even more interesting. I love to read books, but when I can talk to an author and hear about it from his or her perspective, it brings it to light. Now you know when you read it why Bill did so many of these, why he wrote about it, and how he feels. He's a historian, but he has a great heart. And he wants people to do the right things, and it upset him as it does me when you saw people taken advantage of and not being fair with people. So I just have to tell you, the book really is excellent, and I think you're going to write some more.
Well, thank you very much, Anita.
Yeah, no, I believe that. So I don't know, maybe it's a more pocket full of posies.
Well, I'm going to work harder next time on the title. I will tell you that. There's a zillion pocketful of posies. They're all kids' books. I looked and researched and didn't find any novels, but I neglected to research to find children's books. So it's better to search it on Amazon with my author name than it is by the title of a book.
Well, true, but there are a lot of books that the title, just like 50 Shades of Grey, sorry to bring that up, that doesn't mean a thing, that title. But yet some people got the book. And, of course, I don't have to tell you how many copies it sold, but that's what, sex sells, right?
Exactly.
So this is a book on sex, drugs, and all that goes with it, and added to the FBI, the assassinations of our national leaders. I mean, it was quite a time. You really picked just the exact period there. So I want to thank you so much, Bill, and we appreciate it. And the magazine has just come out, and it's will be inserted in the Miami Herald, I think, maybe this coming Friday. And then I know that people will be seeing it, and I thank you so much. We're so proud of you, and we appreciate it. Have you seen has the magazine reached you yet?
Yes, I have.
It's nice, isn't it?
Yes, it's very nice.
Yes, and we put you right next to a celebrity writer, as a matter of fact, Darwin Porter. We just came back from New York and stayed at his home. So, you're right up there with all the big ones.
Yeah, well, I'm on a magazine that has Julian Lee-Dreyfus on the cover. That's cool.
Not bad, right?
Yeah, not bad at all.
Yeah, well, thank you again, and good luck, and hopefully we'll be able to take care of your next book.
All right, thank you so much.
All right. Bye, Bill.